Hey everybody, what's shaking? My name is Doug Campbell, and I write and host a podcast called The Dallas Action, presented by Wall Street Window. The Dallas Action, by the way, a name I totally snaked from the McCone rally document. What we do here is an ongoing auditory, deep historical study of the JFK assassination, and we use 5 things to do this. We try to apply 5 things. We use primary resource material, logic, reason, critical thought, and analysis. These are what we attempt to apply to the studies. Real quick, a huge thanks to Lancer, specifically Miss Deborah, Miss Gabriella, and Mr. Larry for the invitation to participate. It is quite an honor. My friend, producer Grant Wilson, is at the helm, making it sound awesome, and I'm ready if you guys are. All right? So we're going to start today by talking about an extremely weird, and intriguing incident within the narrative of the assassination, and that is the occurrence of the discovery of a letter mailed from Havana, Cuba, addressed to accused presidential assassin Lee Oswald, and signed with the name Pedro Charles, and subsequent weird letters connected to this weird letter to Oswald. Now, quite often here on the Dallas Action, at the top of the show, we will reference articles, books, blogs, etc. by thorough and reputable authors, writers, and researchers to gain a little context regarding the subject at hand, and we're going to do the same here today. So, for that context, we are going to read a little bit from a very fine and informative article that can be found in Mr. Jefferson Morley's very fine jfkfacts.org website, written by Mr. Arnaldo M. Fernandez. It's from June of 2014. The article is titled, Letters to Oswald, Hoax or Evidence. Mr. Fernandez begins, Figure 1, please. On January 17th of 1964, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover wrote to J. Lee Rankin, the General Counsel of the Warren Commission, on the evidence compiled as Commission Document 295. 4 letters postmarked in Havana that suggested or alleged that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was a contract killing undertaken by Lee Harvey Oswald under the direction of an agent for Fidel Castro named Pedro Charles. Hoover concluded it was some type of hoax, possibly on the part of some anti-Castro group, since the FBI crime lab found that the same Remington No. 10 typewriter had been used to prepare all 4 letters. The letters were Pedro Charles to, quote, friend Lee, unquote, dated November 10, 1963, and postmarked on November 28th, addressed to Lee Harvey Oswald, Mail Office, Dallas, Texas. And then there was one from Mario del Rosario Molina to Senator Kennedy, dated November 27, 1963, and postmarked on November 28th, addressed to Mr. Roberto Kennedy, Secretary of Justice, Department of Justice. That is incorrect. And Miguel Galvan Lopez to the Voice of America and Diario de Nueva York, both dated on November 27th, both postmarked on December 3rd. The first letter, the Charles letter, advises Oswald to close the business as soon as possible, close ASAP, and abounds both in direction, do not be foolish with the money I gave you, and don't forget to do all I told you to the very letter and leave nothing that could lead to your trail, and promises, after the affair, I am going to recommend much to the chief, and I will send you the money, and we will see each other in Miami. The other 3 letters denounce Charles as a Castro agent who had paid Oswald for killing the U.S. president. And again, that's from jfkfacts.org, Letters to Oswald, Hoax or Evidence by Arnaldo M. Fernandez. Okay, sidebar here. Take note. There are going to be a few points about this whole affair, guys, that we're going to want to stick a pin in for later. Going to be 4 points, to be precise. Now, let's read this initial letter allegedly to accused assassin Lee Oswald. Figure 4 is from the FBI, their official translation of the letter. It says Lee Harvey Oswald. Again, guys, that's figure 4. Lee Harvey Oswald, mail office, Dallas, Texas, USA. Dear friend Lee, I am writing to you once more since we saw each other in Miami. You took the Spanish books from the hotel. I have practically none left. I want you to know that the man is thinking about visiting your city in the near future, so that you must close the deal as quickly as possible. As I told you previously in Miami, I recommend utmost caution and do not do anything crazy with the money I gave you. I do hope that you will not deceive me and that our dreams will come true. After this matter, I'm going to put a good recommendation for you with the chief, who undoubtedly will be greatly interested in knowing you since they need men like you. I told him that you could put out a candle at a distance of 50 meters, and he refused to believe me. He goes on to say, I will send you money and we shall see each other here in Miami as usual. Always sincerely, Pedro Charles. I told him you could put out a candle at 50 meters. So we have an incriminating letter from Havana to a potential assassin or an assassination patsy, Lee Oswald, in a plot to kill Kennedy. All right? So that brings us to the first thing we need to take note of, as figure 5 shows. Stick a pin in it. The letter was postmarked Havana, Cuba. All right? Remember that. Now, to believe that this is authentic, one would have to believe that there was indeed some sort of link between Lee Oswald and the Cuban government, between Oswald, Castro, and the JFK hit. I do not believe this to be the case. No, not at all. And, J. Edgar Hoover himself called it a hoax. But was it a hoax? Or was it planned propaganda? Was it actually part of the frame-up of Oswald? In other words, did the JFK murder plotters arrange for this Pedro Charles letter and the follow-ups to be mailed from Havana by an agent in place in Cuba to help frame the patsy, Lee Oswald? And now, if it was part of the operation, the agent in place who mailed it straight up botched the deal, because although dated November 10th, it wasn't postmarked until the 28th, 6 days after Kennedy's murder. Had it been postmarked the 11th or the 12th, well, that would have been a whole nother kettle of fish, right? It would have been very, very hard for Hoover and us to ignore. Now, let's look at figure number 6 and how this letter is addressed. Lee Harvey Oswald, mail office, Dallas, Texas. Almost like it was mailed, addressed, in a manner that the mailer hopes will get it kicked out, right? Noticed. Dare I say, red flagged. Well, if that was the intent, it worked, didn't it? Moving now to figure 7, guys, we have the second thing that we wish to note about the letters involved in this episode. Addressed in what can certainly be described as an extremely incorrect manner, in an extremely conspicuous manner, as if it were meant to raise a red flag. And you know what? As were the subsequent letters connected to it, as we read Mr. Fernandez describe earlier from his article. Take the letter to Robert Kennedy that we see here in figure number 8. This is, again, from the FBI file, from the translation. Look at how it's addressed. Mr. Robert Kennedy, Secretary of Justice, Department of Justice, Washington, D.C., USA. Again, addressed in the same sort of extra conspicuously incorrect manner. The writer claims to have learned of this plot in this letter from a woman in Cuba who lives with this Pedro Charles. And this woman subsequently had a nervous breakdown. And as we see in figure number 9, the writer closes by saying, as soon as she recuperates from her nervous state and is able to point out the mastermind behind the assassination of President Kennedy, who is none other than Pedro Charles, agent of the State Security Department of Cuba, and a fanatic of Fidel Castro. Sincerely yours, Mario del Rosario Molina. The other letters, guys, same thing. The letter to the Voice of America, for example, to figure 10 now. No street address, just airmail envelope addressed to the Voice of America, the Voice of the United States of America, Washington, D.C. What is that? You know, if that's not extra conspicuous, you know, very incorrect, you know what I mean? Crazy. Let's see, read heading. Then this letter reads in part, gentlemen, we are hereby writing to you to let you know that the assassination of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, is connected with the revolutionary government of Cuba. Approximately 2 months ago, the alleged assassin of the president, Lee Harvey Oswald, had an interview in Miami with Mr. Pedro Charles, an agent of Fidel Castro in Mexico, who had for delivery to Lee Oswald the amount of $7,000. The source is official, from a lady who used to accompany Pedro Charles to a nightclub in Miami and who saw them conferring together several times. And, of course, we go over here to, and it's signed Miguel Galban Lopez. So now, guys, we'll turn to figure 11, and this brings us to the third and fourth things about the Pedro Charles letter to Oswald and the subsequent connected letters that we wish to note. And that is C, the intent to implicate someone in the U.S. in a plot to assassinate Kennedy, a Cuban Castro-led plot, and doing so with letters mailed from Cuba. And D, the appearance of and discovery of subsequent connected additional letters mailed from Havana and signed by others that bolster the conspiratorial implications of the Pedro Charles to Oswald letter, the initial letter. Stick a pin in these 4 points, okay? Stick a pin in them. I told you guys all about all that, so I can tell you about this. Now we're going to go back in time. 1 year and 1 day. We're going back 1 year and 1 day prior to the assassination of John Kennedy. We're going back to November 21st, 1962, and we're going to do so via this file, figure 12. This file right here. It is a House Select Committee on Assassinations file, record number 1801011081017. This is a Secret Service document, guys, slash file of some 164 pages. Here we go. Figure 13. Protective research pending, Washington, D.C., November 21st, 1962. Did I say 63 before? I meant 62. Sorry, guys. 1 year and 1 day before then. November 21st, 1962. Synopsis. A letter in Spanish, postmarked Havana, Cuba, November 14th, 1962, and improperly addressed, involving a plot to assassinate the president, was intercepted by this service. Subsequent investigation disclosed Antonio Rodriguez E. Jones as the most logical intended recipient of the letter and the person designated to carry out this plot. Investigation continuing to establish the identity of the co-conspirators of this plot. Collateral investigation requested of various offices as indicated. Does any of that sound familiar? I believe a lot of that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Almost a year to the day prior to the day that the Charles letter to Oswald was dated, a letter in Spanish, postmarked Havana, involving a plot to assassinate President Kennedy, improperly addressed. Now, let's go to figure 14 and read this letter. Comrade Rodriguez, in accord with the planning and obstinate attitude of Kennedy to invade Cuba, carry out the attempt on his life in the terms conceived. I am not giving you more data because it is not necessary, since all that you have to know, you know, and for its own security and effectiveness of the planning, I comply thus with superior orders. I have had no other way of communicating this to you by any other safer means. For that reason, I had to do it by letter. In the United States, they are not in habit of opening the letters. For that reason, I trust everything will go well. A good communist has to run these risks. We have to count on our own energies because USSR has not adopted a solid position with Cuba. These are high-level questions that a good communist card-carrying should not question. If he does it in that way, it will be for the good of all communists that are in the world. Cuba is not all. Enough already has been done by Cuba. I will send you the next news if I am able by a safer method. Give me a prompt answer. I am embracing you. Signed, Pepe. So, what we have here, guys, well, we have a match with both points A and points C that we stuck a pin in, as figure 15 shows. The letter was postmarked, and subsequent letters, Havana, Cuba, with the intent to instruct someone in the continental U.S. in a plot to assassinate John Kennedy in late November. Postmarked November 14th, 1962, 1 year, 8 days before Dallas, with instructions from Havana to a Kennedy assassin in the U.S., just like the Pedro Charles letter. Now, those of you who noticed these two words, figure number 16, please, in the earlier Secret Service document, I want to thank you guys for not getting ahead of me. We're going to get there now to figure 17. See, the letter was initially delivered to the wrong guy, Antonio Rodriguez. One Antonio Rodriguez Gil, right? And he was a chauffeur who worked for the Venezuelan delegation to the Inter-American Defense Board in Washington, D.C. It's apparent he was the wrong guy because he immediately freaked out and handed it to his superiors at that delegation, who contacted the FBI just as fast. And upon embarking upon their investigation, it didn't take these Secret Service guys long to ascertain that neither of the two mailing addresses on this letter's envelope, 9246 7th Northwest and 11432 Street. It was 11432 Street, Washington, D.C. Neither of these addresses even existed. Both addresses complete fugazis. Now, check out how the Secret Service summed up this aspect of this letter from Cuba. Now, see if it rings any bells. Figure 18. During the course of the interrogation of Antonio Rodriguez Gil and members of the Venezuelan delegation by the reporting special agent and representatives of the FBI and Metropolitan Police Department, efforts were made to determine if any address existed in Washington, D.C., which would in any way tie in with the address on the envelope of this letter. It appears strange indeed that a conspirator involved in a plot to take the life of the president would not know how to contact a co-conspirator. Although the writer of this letter indicates some knowledge of the United States Customs, he apparently is confused as to the proper procedure employed by the post office in directing mail, in view of the fact that the two addresses that two addresses which are non-existent appear on the envelope. No information could be developed during this investigation which would in any way clarify this grossly inaccurate address. One sentence and one phrase here, guys, that stick out and remind us greatly of letters that were mailed to Lee Harvey Oswald 1 year later. Figure 19, please. Look at this. It would appear strange indeed that a conspirator involved in a plot to take the life of the president would not know how to contact a co-conspirator. The Secret Service even noted that, and of course noting the letter's grossly inaccurate address. And as figure 20 shows, we indeed have a pattern of what can be described as grossly inaccurate addresses here, don't we? So, if we go to figure 21, we now have one match with 3 out of the 4 characteristics of the 1963 event that we wished to note. The letter to this Antonio Rodriguez was postmarked Havana. There were not 1, but 2 totally nonsensical, non-existent addresses on the envelope. Most definitely extremely incorrect and extra conspicuous. And C, with the intent to either instruct or implicate this Rodriguez in a plot to murder the president in late November of 1962. Pattern, anybody? That's 3 out of 4. Now, let's get into this file some more and see if we can draw to that inside straight. You want to? Okay, November 22nd, 1962. The Secret Service guys are all over this thing. Now, say what you will about their behavior and diligence in 1 year from this, but in November of 1962, these guys went into dragnet mode. They fanned out and were truly busting their tails. It's apparent when one scrutinizes this big file. Okay, so let's go to November 22nd and figure 22. So the 21st ends with them interrogating the Venezuelan who pledged full cooperation. As you can see, reports are being made at 2 a.m. They're alerting the Lancer detail at the White House. They're working this thing around the clock. Later that day, they catch a break. An informant designated 1-15-5 delivers to them the name of a viable suspect to figure 23. A young, known to be violent, pro-Castro Cuban named Antonio Rodriguez Jones. And according to this informant, not scared to commit a kidnapping. According to this guy, in August of 61, one Felipe Martez E. Rivero was abducted by a group of Cuban communists in the U.S. after it was learned that Martinez was severing ties with communist Cuba. Martinez was taken to Baltimore, Maryland, and held by this group. Antonio Rodriguez Jones was observed as being a member of the group and standing watch outside the door during the interrogation of Martinez. Now to figure 24 and some basic info. He was born in Cuba, possibly Haiti, in August of 1943. He came to the U.S. to study. He attended École Française Internationale from September of 60 till June of 61, when he enrolled in the Institute of Modern Languages for 1 month. Then transferred to Georgetown University in July of 1961. He's white male, Cuban, 19 years old, brown hair, brown eyes, 5'6", 170. Told the Immigration and Naturalization Service he was seeking political asylum from the Castro regime. And among his past addresses, the Cuban Embassy, Haiti. Cuban Embassy, Haiti. Oh, yeah. Oh, and he has a reputation for pro-Castro violence. That is very important as well. Oh, yeah, you see, young Rodriguez Jones's father was actually a known entity to the government agencies who kept up with these things. His father, Antonio Rodriguez Egazabal, was Castro's former ambassador to Haiti, who, according to the State Department guys, attempted to defect at the August 1961 Punta del Este conference in Uruguay, at which the Kennedy-initiated Alliance for Progress was chartered. A political refugee, ex-Cuban revolutionary who even had a Revolutionary War name, Oso Blanco, or White Bear, to figure 25 now, and our United States Secret Service file. Father, Antonio Andres Rodriguez Ecazabal, alien registration number A1294144. When he entered the U.S., he held Cuban passport number yada, yada, yada. He indicated to immigration officials in New York City and Washington, D.C., that he was formerly employed by the Cuban government as ambassador to Haiti, Guatemala, and Pakistan. His statements reflected that he became dissatisfied with the political condition in Cuba while he was ambassador to Pakistan. He also said that he considers Fidel Castro a traitor to the Cuban people and that he is also opposed to Francois Duvalier, dictator in Haiti. In Guatemala, he claimed that he prohibited Cuba from doing anything to the government of Guatemala. Now, to figure 26. You guys are going to love this part. Look, you saw it down there. You saw what I highlighted, but I'm going to read to it anyway. Check this out. The file also contained medical records regarding an eye operation, which he had undergone at Washington Hospital Center from August 30th to September 4th of 1962. The attending physician was Seymour Derivoff, M.D. It was also noted that Ecazabal employed yada, yada, yada as his nurse. It was further noted that Ecazabal's hospital expense was partially paid by the government-wide indemnity benefit plan, the Federal Employees Health Benefits Plan, indicating that he is an employee of the United States government. What do you guys think the chances are that old Oso Blanco actually defected in place at the conference in Uruguay and was a double agent inside the Castro government for a time before coming to the U.S. finally? Ain't that something? Well, I'll tell you what, learning of this suspect's father, learning that he had the same HMO that they did, didn't deter the United States Secret Service from deciding that Oso Blanco's son was their number one suspect in this assassination plot, focused on John Kennedy in November of 1962. And as we can see in Figure 27, blanket heavy surveillance of the younger Rodriguez commenced on November 24th, with the United States Secret Service even securing an apartment in Rodriguez's building on the 28th, from which to surveil him. And it is quiet, all is quiet for 11 days. And then, as Figure 28 shows, a huge development is reported. December 8th, 1962, a second letter in Spanish, postmarked Havana, Cuba, November 29th, 1962, was addressed to Bernardo Morales at Post Office Box 1624, a quote-unquote well-known anti-communist drop located in Miami, Florida. The sender of this letter was identified as Jose Menendez, apparently of Havana, Cuba. Investigation being continued as on both letters to determine whether a plot exists to assassinate the president. The Miami office is currently investigating the circumstances surrounding receipt of this second letter. That's right, guys. Another letter regarding this communist Cuban plot alleged to kill JFK, postmarked Havana and addressed to a quote-unquote well-known anti-communist drop in Miami. It was actually a CIA Cuban ops drop. That's what that was. Oh, yeah, anti-Castro drop, a blind drop. Now, how we can deduce this is coming up. Now, let's read this letter. Figure 29. Dear Bernardo, today Carlos gave me your new P.O. box. This info was given him by your friend Miriam. For days I wanted to write you, as I have, to various of our mutual friends, giving them the instructions which follow and which I am sending you. I hope that they will arrive in time. Now, to the matter, I have already communicated to your friends in Miami and Passaic and to those in Washington the precise instructions for the attempt which we are planning against Kennedy in Washington, or if that should fail when he visits Brazil. It is necessary to mortally strike imperialism at its very heart. If we are able to kill President Kennedy, it would be a great success, super extraordinary for Fidel and for the communist liberation movement. Now, to figure 30. I have decided to send you this by mail since your anti-communist address certainly will not be controlled by the FBI. Furthermore, I do not wish to take advantage of the other means. The specific and detailed instructions of the plan will be sent by means known to you. Answer by the same means. Fidel is very anxious to know how the plans are progressing. I salute you. Signed, Pepe. Yep, you guys are way ahead of me. I can tell. This is a smart crowd. The United States Secret Service summary of this indicated that an entity designated 115-9 was somehow able to identify the sender of this letter as one Jose Menendez. The Secret Service, as Figure 31 shows, were able to quickly ascertain the following about this Menendez. Jose Menendez, a.k.a. Jose Menendez y Ramos, described as Cuban male, date of birth November 11, 1921. He lived and worked in Tampa, Florida prior to October 8, 1961 when he left for Havana. Subject said to be an officer in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, a pro-communist group, and now he occupies a position in the Cuban government. A communist and known alleged member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee implicated in this plot. Now, very, very interesting. So, how did this second letter compare to the earlier Rodriguez letter, Figure 32? On December 10th, 1962, a photostatic copy of the letter addressed to Antonio Rodriguez at Washington, D.C. was received by the Miami office, and comparison of the handprinting on that letter with the handprinting on the letter addressed to Bernardo Morales in Miami, Florida, makes it appear evident that both letters were penned by the same person, same author, according to the Secret Service investigators. So, as Figure 33 shows, guys, the 4 points of interest regarding the Pedro Charles letter to Oswald, the subsequent letters, the whole incident of 1963, they all apply, boom, to the Antonio Rodriguez letters of November 1962. Postmarked Havana, check. Addressed in an extremely incorrect, extra conspicuous, red flag raising manner, check. Intent to instruct, implicate someone here in the U.S. in a plot to kill Kennedy, check. The discovery appearance of additional letters from Havana that bolster the conspiratorial implications of the first, check. And we can say additional letters, plural, because this is indeed the case. This document is interesting because we learn not only of the third letter, guys, connected, but exactly how the Secret Service got a hold of the second one. Figure 34, please. Subject interviewed under pretext. Information developed concerning the existence of a third letter postmarked Havana, Cuba, addressed to one Carlos Meneses and signed Pepe, the same guy. There is evidence that a pattern has been established which indicates that these letters have been purposely misdirected as part of disruptive tactics by the sender. And as you can see in the bubble there, the man they got got the second letter from was one Mr. Tom Flynn of the Central Intelligence Agency, a liaison man. Now, to figure 35, page 87 of this document. 115.5 has advised that all of the Antonio Rodriguez in Washington, D.C. have been checked and that the subject, Antonio Rodriguez Jones, is still the best possible suspect as the intended recipient. It now appears that the second letter concerning the Cuban plot to assassinate the president was obviously misdirected. Further, that from the similarity of words and phrases in the general context, the second letter is associated with the first and may have been authored by the same person or group. In light of this recent development, every effort will be made to determine whether or not these letters were purposely misdirected to the hands of individuals known to be anti-communist. If such is true, the sender would know full well that the letters would be turned over to the hands of the appropriate U.S. government authorities for investigation. Also, a possibility exists that these letters may have been written in code or with some secret ink. This possibility will be explored during the course of the investigation. So now, for the same reasons we noted earlier about all this these inaccurate addresses, in a red flag raising manner, the same thing we suspected in the case of the 1963 letters. What do they say? Purposely misdirected. It's the same thing. November 1962, November 1963. These two occurrences absolutely mirror one another, guys, to a tantalizing degree. What was it that the late John Judge taught us about coincidence? If the Pedro Charles / Oswald incident was indeed part of the plan of the very people that set Lee Oswald up and not a hoax, if the folks who framed Lee Oswald and put those shooters in Dealey Plaza in November of 1963 did arrange for the incriminating Pedro Charles and subsequent letters to be mailed from Cuba by an agent in place in Havana, does that potentially mean that we have a heretofore previously unknown plot by the same people in play 1 year earlier? A plot to murder Kennedy and frame this Antonio Rodriguez Jones? I mean, I got to tell you, the similarities here are too close for comfort. It's at least too tight to ignore, I mean, to me it feels like same team, same play, different set of downs. Right? Well, yeah. So who called the play? I don't know, but I keep thinking about that second 1962 Rodriguez letter. Of this letter, we know the source of the original mailed to one of their anti-Castro Cuban ops dead drops or blind drops in Miami was CIA. And that, too, is very interesting because that makes me immediately question the provenance of the second letter. I mean, I'm not kidding. It could very well be a CIA product. I wonder if this Tom Flynn character owned a Remington Model 10 typewriter. Anyway, in the months that followed, the younger Rodriguez pretty well kept his nose clean. He attended school, went home, didn't receive any more incriminating letters. He generally stayed out of trouble. His father, though, the former ambassador, not so much. Nope, as figure 36 shows. Check this out. Excuse me, February 28th, 1963. On February 20, Charles E. Taylor had another briefing with the Central Intelligence Agency inasmuch as the Haitian situation is very fluid. Haitian situation. A new opposition group has recently been formed with the avowed purpose of overthrowing the regime of Duvalier in Haiti. This group is headed by Oso Blanco Antonio Rodriguez Ecazabal. He has attempted to enter the scene as a catalyst to the number of opposition groups, exerting his influence in an effort to have the leaders of these groups submerge their interests in the overall common goal of deposing Duvalier. Oso Blanco was unsuccessful in attempting to reconcile these groups. He feels the United States is not providing adequate support to the opposition groups in their efforts to overthrow Duvalier. He is currently attempting to enlist aid and assistance for this new group, which is nameless, and has stated he would seek aid from any source, indicating in order of priority Russia, China, and Cuba. Now, yeah, I know, guys. Now, remember, we read that Oso Blanco wanted to defect during the Alliance of Progress conference in Punta del Este. You remember that? And we speculated that he may have defected in place based on the tidbit that his hospital stay was paid for by the U.S. government employee health insurance plan. Oh, yeah. Well, dig figure 37. Oso Blanco's defection was timed to coincide with the Punta del Este conference. Look at there. Second paragraph. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently checking to determine the nature of Oso Blanco's recent visit to Miami, Florida. It is believed that he has had previous contact with Carlos Prios Socaris, the former president of Cuba, and one Manuel Artime, brigade commander representing the Cuban Council. And guys, that guy, Manuel Artime, and his assassination connections, that's a whole presentation unto itself. But those of you who know, know. So, he did, in fact, defect in place. The father of the guy who was apparently the patsy designate in November of 1962 was, for a time at least, a CIA double agent in the Cuban government. Wow. Okay. To figure 38. Confidential informant has established that the airplane was obtained. They're talking about this airplane that Oso Blanco is flying guns with, was obtained from sources in Martinique, and also that these leaflets were prepared in Martinique. What leaflets? Well, we skipped that part, guys. He's going to do a leaflet run over Haiti the way Sturgis and Alexander Rourke did in Cuba. You know, he got that bright idea. And this is crossed out. This is interesting that this is crossed out. I just thought I'd bring it up. It is to be noted that when Oso Blanco defected to the United States from the Cuban Foreign Service, he requested that he be allowed to enter the United States through Paris, France. It is believed that an entry to the United States designed by Oso Blanco for the purpose of establishing a base at Martinique for future activities. And then it says, on May 23rd, disclosed that no passport had been issued to Oso Blanco to leave the United States, as he is a parolee and not a citizen. An exit permit was issued, and this was surrendered when he arrived at San Juan, Puerto Rico, en route to Washington, D.C. So I guess once a revolutionary, always a revolutionary, right? But in Miami at JM Wave, some receive cover and help for these activities. Mr. Oso Blanco had apparently outlived his usefulness to the agency because Oso Blanco, CIA Cuban double agent and father of our might be a potential assassination patsy to figure 39, was arrested by immigration on July 23rd, and less than a month later put on a plane after agreeing to quote-unquote voluntary deportation. He came back a few months later, which tells me, you know what, he probably never exited from beneath the agency umbrella. So, what about the case of these threatening letters, this plot alleged against President Kennedy from November 21st, 1962? Figure 40, please. The Central Intelligence Agency, this is dated, this is important. Look where it says period covered. Washington, D.C., 11/12 through 21 of 1963. The Central Intelligence Agency advises that agents recently executed in Cuba are not associated with this case. The case is in the upper right-hand corner. Cuban plot to assassinate the president, Antonio Rodriguez Ecazaba. The son's name is suddenly not on this. It's the father's. That's interesting, too. On November 12, 1963, a bulletin appeared in the Washington Daily News, Washington, D.C., under Dateline Miami, November 12. 4 men identified as Central Intelligence agents who attacked Cuba in a small boat from the Florida Keys were executed Friday by a Cuban firing squad, Havana Radio said. They were identified as Antonio Rodriguez and Joseph F. Bolanos Morales on November 13, 1963. Miss Romans, I wonder if that's a typo. I wonder if it's really Roman. You think that's Jane Roman? She of the Oswald, Mexico City tomfoolery? Liaison representative for the CIA was called by telephone and apprised of this report as it tied in with this case. It was pointed out that the first letter in the investigation of this case, postmarked Havana, Cuba, November 14, 1962, was addressed to Antonio Rodriguez in Washington, D.C., and the second letter, postmarked Havana, Cuba, November 29, 1962, was addressed to Bernardo Morales in Miami, Florida. After appropriate inquiry of officials at the CIA, Mrs. Romans advised the reporting special agent on November 18, 1963, that there was no information on file at the CIA that would indicate that these individuals were associated in any way in this case. Disposition, closed, Washington. This document, the synopsis, it covers a period of time up until November 21st, 1963. Disposition, closed, Washington. Case closed on November 21st, 1963. And this incident, this whole thing, was very shortly about to occur again in connection with the plot that did kill Kennedy. Closed on November 21st. It's a good thing, I guess, because the Secret Service were about to get way busier than they ever hoped to be. So what do we have here? An authentic threat? A hoax? A propaganda op by Castro's people to jam up some of the CIA's Miami anti-Castro people? Or same playbook, different play? Was the younger Rodriguez really part of a November 1962 plot to murder Kennedy? Was his father? Or were either one of them potentially an earlier Oswald, a potential patsy by the same bad guys? All very good questions, I think. And if you guys go to figure 41, the last panel there, that's the promotional stuff. Hey, guys, do not forget to go find the Dallas Action presented by Wall Street Window and listen. If you enjoyed this presentation, you're going to love the podcast, because this is exactly what goes on at the Dallas Action every episode, every month. If you just Google my name, Doug Campbell and the Dallas Action, you will find it everywhere you find quality podcasts. Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, CastBox, Player FM, iTunes, the Tangent Bound Network, and on and on and on. Also, please do not forget to listen to every single episode, past and future, of Quick Hits, a JFK assassination news and notes podcast that I co-host with my man Rob Clark of the Lone Gunman podcast. Also, everywhere you find quality podcasts, both brought to you by Drop D Podcast Productions. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks again. Thanks, Lancer, for the invite. Very, very big thanks to producer Grant for making it sound awesome. And to you guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for playing along. I'm Doug. I'm out.